Dear Sammy, get well soon. Dan. Stopgap, as defined by Webster's Dictionary. A temporary way of dealing with a problem or satisfying a need. That is what this film is. It is a stopgap film. I have 2 films, 3 films. I think that'll be good that I'm working on that I do not have time to work on. So we're doing a stopgap. We're doing a Q&A film. I've got my readers. I've got my non-readers. I've got my iPad as a prop. Got up this morning and started reading News of the World. If you haven't read it, very good. So we've got, I don't know, I purposely did not look at the questions because I don't want to overthink these answers, right? Now, before we go any further, just remember I am one person. I started looking at the screen again. I'm one person with one opinion about a variety of stuff that you may agree with or you may not agree with. That is perfectly fine. I have lived a weird life, and maybe that weirdness will help you in some way. All right, the first question is about AG23. I just got this again via email 5 minutes ago. The fact that anyone is emailing me about AG23 is a good sign. For those of you who don't know, that's my collaborative, sorry, I got a stray hair flying around here. That's my collaborative project, zine, with Beyond Clothing, and we are editing the proof of the 2nd issue right now. The proof came, it's beautiful. The cover treatment, the treatment on the back cover is gorgeous. The design is gorgeous. I made slight modifications to some of the contributors, moved a couple of images around, and then added a few things that I thought maybe the designer, I don't know, we have to, that's what happens when the designer sends a proof, you look at it, you make corrections, it goes back. We typically do this twice, and then we go to print. So we should be going to print in the next few weeks. Issue number 3 is, sorry, it's a bad hair day. I just got off my bike. Cut me some slack. Issue number 3 is already filled, and issue number 4 has 2 people for it already. And I'm going with 5 or 6 contributors in each issue maximum. The shipping issues that we've had in the past are not solved. That's one of the things. For those of you listening and watching this film from overseas, the mailbox in my neighborhood got pried open this week, and all the mail was stolen, pilfered, and left along the side of the road. My letters to one state over are taking 3 to 5 weeks. My brother wrote me and said that everything I'm sending to my mother has been opened and taken out of the packaging, and my brother said it looks like they had a fast food lunch and then stepped on all of it and then put it back in and gave it to my mom. So the shipping situation in America right now is bad, to say the least. So bear with us, but the 2nd issue is very close. 3rd issue is going to be fantastic as well. And the 4th issue, the 2 people that I have so far are both really good. And the contributors, just so you know, because this is another question I've gotten, contributors are a combination of people I've known in the past, people who I've known that have suggested someone else. So like a prior contributor says, hey, I loved being in the zine, you should look at this person. And then the 3rd group are people who've submitted online that I don't know. And it's a combination of those 3 things. So again, we have an open submission portal at ag23mag.com. Anybody can submit a story. And remember, not looking for portfolios, looking for stories. Doesn't have to be photography. Can be written, can be illustration, can be design, can be scientific. It does not matter. In fact, I don't want a bunch of photo essays. I want a mix of content. Moving on, little did I know what a hornet's nest I would stir by accidentally mentioning this whole thing about box speed on film. Ease up, people. Don't shoot the messenger. Box speed on film. There is a question in here somewhere. I'm going to just bypass it and go straight to my answer. Box speed, it's like a red light in Sicily. It's a suggestion that you stop. It's not a real threat that you have to stop. If you've ever driven in Sicily, you will know what I'm talking about. Red lights are a vague notion of, you may want to look both ways before you blow through it. Box speed is what a brand puts on a box to give people a ballpark. If you are a photographer who is shooting a lot of negative film, I don't know many people shooting transparency film today. There's a few. I don't know why I would shoot transparency film today. I would shoot color negative for sure, and I would shoot black and white negative for sure. Transparency is not as alluring to me as it once was. Remember, back in '92 when I got out of school, all color that I was involved with was transparency. you had to shoot transparency. For editorial work, for newspaper work, it was transparency. There was a slow shift happening to negative, but and then when it finally went, everybody dumped over to negative for the most part. But transparency, those films are not true to box speed either. But here's the thing that I realized that people might not know. And this was day one of photo school. And let me just give you a little recap here. Photo school was not about camera equipment. It was not about tech. It was not about how to. You spent 2 weeks on that, and then you never talked about it again. You spent 3.5, 4 years doing projects and learning how to shoot, compose, edit, sequence, talk about your work, print your work, all that stuff. That's the important stuff. But you learned immediately, day one, that if you shot a film at box speed and processed it normal, you were not going to be thrilled with the result. You were going to have thin negatives. Thin meaning underexposed. So, you immediately learned that you might want to shoot Tri-X at 200, 250, 320, maybe even 100. I'm not kidding. It's not just me. That's the way it is. With negative film, you are exposing for the shadow. Bear with me here. Stay with me. Look at the pen. You're exposing for the shadow, and you're processing for the highlight. So, overexposing that box speed means that you're giving more light to those shadows. Now, if you're like me and used to get Fs on all your assignments in college because I didn't want tonal range. I am not Ansel Adams. I don't look at Ansel Adams photographs, even though I have a ton of respect for the guy. Not my style of work. I don't care about tonal range. I want black, white, grain, contrast, darkness, and mood. I knew that from day one. That's what I wanted. And the school was like, no, that's not right. You have to do zone, the grayscale, and you have to do the zone system, which is why I got bad grades on all my printing assignments. But even still, I realized I'm not shooting 3200 at 3200. I'm not shooting Tri-X at 400. And by the way, remember, there were 2 Tri-X's. There was a 320 Tri-X in medium format for retouchers. Look at all the stuff I'm showing. Right now, there's someone out there's head just blew off and went out of the sunroof of the car. If they're watching this somehow driving and holding their phone, which I hope they're doing, their head just exploded and flew out the sunroof. They just found out that there were 2 Tri-X's. A 320 in 120, 220, 4 retouchers. And the 220 was fickle because, man, when you pack that much film on a 220 roll, it's so easy to scratch. Should I be charging for this? Possibly. There was a question in there. Just make it up. Whatever you want that filled that box speed film thing, make it up. 3. Hi Dan, could you speak about your approach to managing your digital archive? I am currently running with 2 very large Lightroom catalogs, but I feel there must be a better way. Short answer, no. You do not want to know my scenario for archiving digital. This is the white elephant in the room of professional photography. It has been for 15 years. You know me, I like to rub people the wrong way. My wife says I do it naturally. So I go to Photo Plus Expo in New York at least a decade ago. And just for sport, this was before the show went so far downhill and just became a widget show for consumers. Back when it was a legit professional show where Albert Watson might be walking down the aisles. I never saw him there. I'm just fantasizing that actually happened. And so one year I go to my buddy, I'm going to go stir the hornet's nest. I'm going to go from booth to booth to these camera manufacturers and to everybody else, and I'm going to ask them how they're archiving their images. And it was let's just say it didn't go over that well. I got a lot of get out of the booth. I got a lot of don't worry about it. Someone will figure something out. I got a lot of just get out of here. We don't give a crap about archiving. It's all about the front end camera system. And I knew at that point, nobody had a good solution for archiving digital. You had newspapers archiving on Kodak Photo CD. Well, guess what? Great, archival disc until the maker of the player and reader went out of business. Those dead. You had people archiving on the giant laser disc. Those gone dead. You had people archiving on archival discs like Apple was running Pioneer reader writers in their computers. They stopped making them. So now what are you going to do? And plus 1/3 of those things failed over time. So I realized immediately this is a problem, not just for me, for everybody. And so most of the photographers I know that downplay this, who claim they have a system, are the worst prepared. They just don't want to admit it. They don't want to talk about it. And it's not sexy, where you're putting stuff. It's way more sexy to talk about a Superflex 5000 1.4 with a fluoride element. Everybody wants to talk about that, but you're like, where are you archiving? And everyone's like, don't want to talk about it. But I have a friend, believe it or not. Believe it or not, I have a friend. I think he's a friend. He may beg to differ. I'm going to think of him as a friend. And he's very smart. And if you're talking about taxonomy, archiving, SEO, labeling, all that, he's really good. And he said to me 2 years ago, he goes, I don't use hard drives anymore. And I was like, what? I don't use hard drives. And this is what he does, but I know I'm going to get this wrong. But in theory, think about this as a possibility. He uses PhotoShelter Pro. PhotoShelter is a great company, great product. I used it for years. If I was still a photographer, I would still have PhotoShelter. I kept it for 10 years after not being a photographer because I didn't want to get rid of it because I liked the company. I was paying 29 bucks a month, 30 bucks a month for 8 years, and I didn't need it, and I still did it. So PhotoShelter Pro, which is unlimited storage and an amazingly accessible, deliverable platform that allows you to really harness the work that you're working on at the moment and then sending to customers and clients. I used it all the time. I used it with clients all over the world. He uses that, and then he uses Backblaze B2 as an archive. I believe they're in Oregon, so you've got one storage facility there, and I'm sure they have redundant backups as well. But that's just for backup. Then he uses Amazon Glacier for his cold storage, deep storage, where that's end of days. You know, we take an ICBM strike here in Santa Fe, and you're just melted into the pavement, but somehow you resurrect yourself like, you know, Sarah Connor. And then you basically are like, I need to get my archive back. Well, Amazon's going to have it in some cave somewhere. And with cold storage like that, there's a fee to retrieve the work and there's a time delay. But you imagine with their redundancies, and you can pick what servers you want in what regions of the world. So if you want to back up to Ireland and India, you could probably do that. All I'm saying is you're having multiple online redundancies. Amazon Glacier is very affordable. You are going to pay. There's no way around this. You are going to pay to archive digital storage, whether you're buying I've got 40 terabytes on a SATA removable drive system in my office, and when those fill up, I buy 4 more and I buy 4 more, but that is temporary short-term storage. The SATA drive and my computer and everything else is like my Dodge Ram 1500. It is going to falter and wear out and break down, and then I am screwed. The technical term is totally hosed when that happens. And so you better have redundant backup. The tricky part too is getting massive amounts of data online. Get this, you'll love this. You'll love this. Go ahead, get ready to laugh. Take a deep breath, because the fastest internet speed available at my house is 1.5 megabits per second. So can you imagine trying to use 1.5 megabits per second and uploading 40 terabytes of data, 50 terabytes of data, 60 terabytes of data? I don't have that much time left. I would age out. I would Doc Holiday out in some sanitarium in Arizona with my shoes off and choking to death. So anyway, it's not going to work, not going to happen. That's my advice to you. Lightroom feels a bit like the only game in town. It's not, but every time I do a public lecture, which prior to COVID was all the time, I always ask people, how many in this room use Lightroom? And I would say 80%. You obviously have other options, but when your Lightroom catalog gets a certain size, you got to start over again. It's ugly. And thank God I don't shoot very much anymore. I mean, I shoot so little. I just was funny. I haven't charged the batteries in this X-T4 in probably a month. I've never used a full battery in any Fuji camera I've ever owned. Think about that. I've never used a battery. And in the X-T2, the batteries are the size of like a peanut. And they're horrible. Never used a full battery. So I got that going for me, which is nice. Okay, question number 4. Hey, Dan, you said once in a conversation with Mark Silver, the real conversation of photography happens away from social media, which is very true and great for mental peace for creation. I agree. Do creative agencies or clients also believe this, or do they do the normal search the hashtag and pick the highest viewed artist? Yes, there is a public conversation and a social media conversation in professional photography, and then there is a private conversation, and they're very different. And if you're not in the circles, you ain't getting in on the private conversation. The facade that happens in modern photography is incredibly strong. Social is about creating a palatable version of yourself, palatable to as many people as possible. It's fake, it's phony. I just got off my bike. About halfway through the ride, I was on this piece of sort of tricky single track, and instead of paying attention to the single track, I was thinking about a photojournalist I know. He's famous, very good, smart guy, talented. I think I follow him on Twitter, which is the only social network I'm on, and that's a whole nother story. I don't really pay attention to it. I post and then ignore it as much as possible. But I thought to myself, I don't want to know him on there because it's not him. It's a version of him that he has to toe the line. And I don't care because I know him in person, and in person he's a totally different person, and he's really funny and he's super smart, and I love him in person, but online I don't really want to know him. The conversation about photographers with clients is very different from what you might expect. And this is getting more and more and more strange on a weekly basis. I'll let you in on a little secret. If you've ever been in a meeting, and this goes back 12 years, this really started to happen probably 12 years ago. Go into meetings with brands, companies, corporations, agencies. The conversation about photography was not about photography. It was about metrics. This was the beginnings of the data game. Metrics. Fast forward to today, very little talk of the actual photo work. It's about metrics. It's about your following and your following's following, and who you are, where you live, what your demographic is. There's all kinds of things that play in. Oftentimes, there's not a lot of people around who know about photography. Why does anyone assume that a creative director at an agency knows anything about photography? Did they go to photography school? Did they study it? No, most of the time they didn't. They have to wear 10 different hats at one time. They're looking at all kinds of stuff that have nothing to do with the actual work. So it's kind of disheartening. I think a lot of photographers inflate their self-worth so far beyond what it is and think that people are in these meetings talking about them individually. And I don't think that's the case. I think it happens, but it doesn't happen nearly as frequently as we would like. And the fact is that you sold photographers out there. We're all guilty. We sold ourselves down the river. When this stuff came along, when Facebook came along, and we started blathering our lives out onto these platforms with nothing in return, all the while knowing that the platforms were undermining our industry, our culture, our society, and we kept doing it, we got nobody to blame. So yes, the conversation, on those few times now during the year when I'm able to have real conversations with what I would call the legends of photography. So I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of friends who are photographers. They're older than me. They're far better than me. They're far more successful than me, more knowledgeable than me. They've had better careers than me, but we're friends. And sometimes, like back when we lived in Los Angeles, this happened all the time, but we would go to parties. And you go to a party, and depending on who the photographer is that's hosting the party, you get the best people in the world at the party. And because we're all friends, the guard's down. And you sit and have conversations with people. I'll give you an example. I don't like to name names. I don't. Because it makes me sound like a douche, which is one of my all-time favorite words. Frank Ockenfels is a photographer who lives in LA. Frank Ockenfels III. Frank is one of the most creative photographers you are ever going to meet. He can do pen and ink illustration. He can write. He can draw. He can do photography. He makes something creative every single day. And if you've ever been around him, amazing laugh, was an assistant to Annie Leibovitz, very knowledgeable, hardcore, diehard, knows more about photography than I ever will. When you get a chance to sit and talk to him one-on-one at a party where it's my wife and Frank or his wife, or you're hanging around, there's half a dozen people, it's a blast. Because every single time you are learning something great, and he's funny, and he can back up every single thing that he says because he has this incredible body of work. When you go to his office and studio, up around the rim of the room are magazine covers, and there's probably 50 or 75, and they all look totally different because the guy can do anything. Those are the conversations in the industry that are amazing to have. Those are life-changing meetings. They don't happen very often. That's not the business commercial side of photography. You know, with Frank, you might talk about anything. You know, there's a few other people, and I don't want to mention any more names, but like that's a perfect example. So these meetings that are business meetings about photography are not sexy. They're about data and metrics. And I get it, because the data and metrics can relay back to profitability, but it can also completely and utterly suck the soul out of everything that we're doing. I'm just a bearer of all kinds of positive things, aren't I? All right, moving on. If you were able to sit down with one photographer who is still alive, who would it be and why? As opposed to a dead photographer? If I was going to sit with a dead photographer, that would be kind of creepy. Might make a nice selfie though. Living photographer, here's where this is gonna sting. This is gonna hurt. Stretch. Might want to stretch a little bit before I answer this one, because you might not want to listen anymore. I don't really want to sit with a photographer. I don't talk about photography a whole lot anymore. I quit 11 years ago. So it's not that I don't like photographers or I don't want to, I wouldn't take the chance. Salgado, if he walked through the door right now, I'd say, get out, it's COVID, you don't have a mask. But if it wasn't COVID and he came in, yeah, I would love to talk to Salgado. Terrence Simon would be interesting. I don't know much about her and her world is foreign to me, so I think that would be kind of cool. Georgia Fiorio, I've always found her a little bit mysterious. I know one person in the world who knows her, total. That's intriguing to me. But here's who I would like to sit down with. Cormac McCarthy, the writer, and he's a recluse. So I like people who are reclusive. I have no interest to sit down with any celebrity at all. I don't like celebrities. I think it's the most unhealthy. If I was looking for a group of people who do less with more on the face of the earth and the history of our planet, celebrities would be at the top of the list. So I don't give a SHI about celebrities. Cormac McCarthy would be fun. I think he's one of the most unique writers. And oh, by the way, this rings a bit of Blood Meridian. If you have, Blood Meridian is sacred. That's top 10 books of all time. This is a little bit there. This is written by a woman out of San Antonio, and she's badass. Never met her, don't know her. First book I've read of hers, and she will take you down and break your arms off. It's very good. Lael Wilcox, the long distance cyclist. She's from Alaska. Don't know her. She looks super nice. Her girlfriend is a photographer, a photojournalist. But Lael has done things on a bicycle that I never will and I would never even attempt. But I don't know. Even though I cycle every day, I don't know that much about it. She seems very intriguing to me. Love to talk to her. And here's the other thing that I like to do is I would prefer to just keep talking to regular people. One of the best things about doing documentary work and doing assignments going back to the late 80s, early 90s, is I've photographed a lot of people I don't know. And those assignments have taken me into places that I would have never gone had it not been for an assignment. I used to drive a Toyota pickup truck. I've had 2 or 3 of those in my lifetime. I did an assignment one time where I drove up and it was an assignment in a, let's just say, red, white, and blue part of the United States. And the guy threw me off his property because I was driving a Toyota and not an American brand. He made me park down the road. He and I ended up spending a day together. We were buds by the time I left. He didn't know me. He just saw the Toyota, got rankled, and threw me off. And I was kind of pissed and didn't know him. But we hung out and talked for a while. And that's, we came to our senses. Do we agree on everything? Are we always going to agree on everything? No. But talking to everyday people, talking to your neighbors is way better than sitting down for me with talking to a photographer now. I feel like photography to me is a road I've walked for a long time. I've been up it and down it. I've gone through the weeds on the side of the road. I've seen rattlesnakes and glass bottles and trash and maybe even found a baby or two. Just kidding. But I've walked it for a long time. I don't need to walk it that much anymore. So I understand your question. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your question. But whatever. You know what I mean? I would sit down with myself. If you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Okay, Daniel. I love the general chaos of your videos. That's called a backhanded compliment. Knowing where it should lead to, but not knowing if it will ever get there. Again, backhanded compliment, I'll take it. It's the thing that keeps me watching. To my question, if I wanted to put on an exhibition or gallery, what would the amount of images you would consider to be right? I know it can be based on venue size, but in all the images work and flow together, what is too many to take in for that hour or two that you're in the building? 12, 24, 29. Thanks for the great bits throughout the videos. So if you're going to do an exhibition, how many prints is that? That's a very hard question to answer. There is no such thing. I was almost in an exhibition that reminded me of the Bad Company album, 10 from 6, where the gallery owner said, I forget, it was called 4x5 was the name of the exhibition. 4 images by 5 different photographers in a show in LA. And I weaseled out of the show somehow. I don't remember why. Good gallery, amazing woman who does things in a very different way. But I just fell out of love with even bothering to try to show photography. But it doesn't matter. You could do a single image exhibition depending on how you did it and mix what other content you mixed in. Venue size is one thing, but also galleries and museums, frankly, are a bit boring. Not all of them, but a lot of them. A lot of photo galleries you walk into and you're like, they're judging me when I walk in. And what they are, they're looking at you and saying, are you going to buy something? The person at the counter looks at you and kind of gives you the one over and then ignores you and doesn't even say hello. That's why I'm not in love with galleries. So there are venues out there that go far beyond. Put your work at the mall. You're going to get it exposed to 10 times the amount of people at a gallery. Some of those people at the mall will be gallery dwellers and others won't, but at least you're exposing it. World Press Photo used to put their exhibition in the mall in Santa Monica. I was like, that's a brilliant idea. They had warning signs about the content, which was nonsense. But I was like, that's smart. Photojournalism in front of the masses. And it's a mall. You have endless space. So it's really hard. I guess the balance would be in the idea that you do not want any fat. You want a trim. You want a filet mignon exhibition. You don't want that steak with the giant piece of fat on the side that freaked me out as a kid. I was like, and people eat that? Oh, you want no fat in that exhibition. Question number whatever. Hope you will present and comment more on photo books. What kinds of books are you missing that no one prints anymore, and what modern format do you like and why? I'm trying not to buy books much anymore because I have too many as it is, and I am trying to downsize. My goal in life is to get rid of much of what I own and go on the road and spend long periods of time in places and getting to know them and basically just living my life and cycling, hiking, fishing, climbing, canoeing, paddling, whatever. That's what I want to do. And doing an occasional photo essay. I buy small art books. I very rarely buy big coffee table books anymore. I just don't have space for them. And frankly, what people are doing with small run art books is more interesting than the big coffee table books. My attention span has been damaged, much like yours. So the idea of sitting and looking through a giant coffee table book doesn't really appeal to me much anymore. And you can see, whoop, my arm's not working properly, but here, these are all wordy books. I'd much rather look at a wordy book. News of the world, wordy book, this is my kind of thing now. So small run art books, you've seen a huge shift in recent years, especially when you go to a photo bookstore, you'll see a lot more diversity in those shelves than you would a few years ago when everybody was doing coffee table, coffee table. The economics on big coffee table books are not good for anyone, anywhere, anyhow. They're expensive. I'm glad people are still doing them. A very, very few photographers need those and demand those that are spending enough time in the fields to really, really, really put that work together. So small run art books are much more democratic. If you go to New York Art Book Fair, San Francisco, Melbourne, Sydney, Wellington, wherever, art book fairs are where it's at. Question number, I don't know, 7, 6. Would photography ever become a neutral thing only linked about the aesthetic of the photo, or the act of choosing something to frame and not frame will always be a way to protest or show opinion about something? What do you think? The only people who care about any of that are other photographers. So for the general public, nothing is a protest. They're just shooting. They're photographing their families, events, whatever, and it's meaningless really to anyone outside of the family. The only people who put that sort of baggage on photography are you and me, who are saying, can we do this without adding some commentary about protest or whatever? I don't think the general public does that. I don't think they care. I certainly, for the first, 30, 20, let's say 20 years of my life, my mother was our family documentarian. She had a Pentax K1000 and always had a bag of Kodachrome and shot every single thing we did. There was never any discussion of that work outside of the family. No one's ever seen it. It's in slide trays at my mom's cabin, and you put it in the slide tray and look at it. It's Kodachrome. It looks amazing. But there was no protest. There was no making a stand. There was no statement, nothing. Even the work that she was shooting outside of the family, my mom's nickname is Annie Oakley. And she was, where I grew up in the country and with a alpha male dominated cultures and community, my mom was an anomaly. My mom went everywhere. When my father first took her to Wyoming and they went deer and antelope hunting, and the guys in Wyoming said, "We don't hunt with women," my father right after I said that, the Atomos goes dark. No idea why. It's back on. Forget it. How would you go marketing and selling a Blurb book project? That is an entirely separate film. That is actually probably a really good film for me to do, seeing as I work for Blurb, and I get that question all the time. That is a multi-pronged answer. Self-publishing a book is not easy. If you are trying to put a book out into the world to legitimately sell it to people you don't know in high quantity, that is a hard mountain to climb for everyone, regardless of what anyone tells you. Now, if you have a website with an email newsletter that you've had for years and you've got 1,500 people in a database, or 2,000 or 40,000 like someone I know, or 400,000 like another person I've heard about, that is a whole game-changing ball game. You can do all kinds of things with that kind of power. If you're on Instagram all day long, but you've never sold anything and you've never self-published and you don't know how to do page design and don't know about typography and have never done any test books and don't really have an audience, you are screwed. You're going to have a really hard time doing that. So to market and sell is a multi-pronged thing. A look at it in a really bad analogy is to look at it as a pie chart. Do you have all the pieces of the pie, or do you have one piece? Do you even know how to make great photography? Number one, or whatever your project is. Are you an illustrator, a writer, a designer, a poet, whatever? Are you good? Why would someone be interested in your work? These are questions that you have to work out up front. And if you're not good, you keep practicing until you are good. If you don't have an audience, you have to build that. You need marketing, you need distribution, you need to build the right product using the right materials at the right price point for the right audience. All of those things come together to determine whether or not you're going to find success in self-publishing. And the same applies for the traditional publisher, but the traditional publisher, if you're going to pay them 20 or 30 grand up front, they are hopefully going to take over some of those things like marketing and distribution, even design, acquisitions editor, they're going to have book editors, copy editors, all that stuff. So you don't necessarily have to do that on your own. It is a complicated maneuver. Now, there are certain ways of doing this. For me, myself personally, I have no interest in selling a book in high volume. I have no interest in selling a book to people I don't know. I am perfectly happy to spend years of my life working on a project and then make a single copy of a single book, look at it, say, all right, I did all right, and then put it on the shelf and move on and go do another project. My goal in life is to disappear. So if the scale is, I want to be famous, is over here, I'm somewhere off the chart on the ground over here on the other side. I want to disappear. My goal in life would be to make enough money to where I would drop off away from society and none of you would ever see me or hear from me ever again. I would use assumed names for every single thing I was doing except for like my banking and like passport and all that stuff. But all the creative stuff would be under assumed names. No one would ever know who it is. That would be my goal. So I find ways of self-publishing on a small scale that make me happy. But when you're marketing and trying to distribute a big full-time scale project, that can be daunting. So let me think about that, and I'll make a specific film on that. I am about to do a film on a book that was done through Blurb. It's in my Books I Love series called Landfill Dogs, and I'm going to break down. I talked to the author. I've talked to a few other people who were involved in the project, and I am going to do a film about how this book and books came to be. There's a limited edition version and a trade version, and she did 2 runs and she went offset and did all kinds of stuff. Her story, I think, will be incredibly helpful for most of you because it hits on all the pieces of the pie on how a project comes to life. All right, we're gonna keep going. Again, I didn't look at these because God knows what these questions are. Someone asked me the other day, I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this one in. Maybe I have it at the end. We can't get through all these. I don't know. All right, I won't jump the line. That's not cool. This is question 10. Do you think there's a point where you should limit posting your better photos for social media views and save them for viewing via a monetary gain means like a photo book? And in your opinion, when is this? Why on earth do you think you're going to make money from a photo book? Seriously, most of the people I know doing photo books are not making any money. They're losing money. That's number one. But yes, to your point, we are so jaded now in terms of content. If you do a 50 image essay that takes you 10 years to do and you share 4 of those images on social, you'll get more than a few people that will say, oh, I've already seen that work. I don't need to see it. I don't need to buy the book. I don't need to do that. They're jaded. They see one thing and they're gone and they move on. I think posting your work on social is one of the dumbest things you could possibly do. All it does is water you down. It waters everyone down. There is not a single person on the planet who is good enough to sustain a daily stream of content on social media. Not one. So you take the best photographer that's ever walked the face of the earth and you start putting their stuff online every day, they're suddenly not so good anymore because you can't make good work at that volume. So you're putting up subpar work. It's watering down your name. It's watering down your brand. It's watering down your brain. It's watering down every single aspect about you. We keep dancing around this issue as if it's going to change. It's been this way forever. It's like crying wolf all day, every day. Look at me, 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 look at me. Okay, now I asked you to look at me for every day for the last year, but now I really want your attention. I really want your undivided attention now. And everyone's like, F you. You've been bugging me for it all day long for a year. I don't want to give you undivided attention. So my point is this. Shut up until you have something to say. I try to live by that motto. I tell people, don't buy my books. I don't want to know you on social. I don't know what else to do. Occasionally, the project I'm working on right now, 2 years I've been working on it, could be potentially the best thing I've ever done. How much have I shared online? 0. Nothing. Nada. Zilch. Nothing. I don't want to share it online. It's not done. Has to be done. When it's done, guess what I'm going to share? Probably zero. I'm going to make a single book, look at it, move on. I don't know what else to say about that. It's a very important question, and it speaks to our culture and society in general, not just photography. Don't talk unless you have something to say. If I see another bait post on Twitter from a photographer, I'm feeling down. How about you? Are you feeling down? I am now. Seeing that post made my inner child's in the ditch with a rattlesnake. Yeah, it's not good. I think I already got this question. I got the question twice, the exact same question twice from someone else. Okay, I think this is the last one. We're going to end here. Hi, Daniel. Question 11. Can anyone tell me even remotely what question we're on? I really do like your black and white photos on your blog. Do you have a favorite preset in Lightroom for black and white? And my second question, do you prefer 23mm f2 or 35 f2 for telling a story? And why not 1.4 versions of these lenses? Thank you for your post. I don't know who sent this question, whoever it is, thank you for the question. Thank everybody for these questions. Favorite preset. I'm laughing because anyone who knows me, if you're asking me about anything to do with post-production and digital, I'm probably the single worst person you could possibly ask. I have a grand total for the entire time I've been using Lightroom, which has been, God knows how long that program has been out. The entire time, I have had a grand total of 2 presets, one color, one black and white. All I know is that the color is Kodak Gold 100, and the black and white is from an individual. I do not remember their name. My guess is they are long gone. I don't know if they're still making these kind of presets. I don't remember where I got it. All I know is it's been in my Lightroom forever. It's my only black and white preset and my only color preset. I just don't care. I hit it, black and white, digital's never gonna look like film. So I make it look, I do a mid-tone bump and I, set a white point or black point. That's it. That's all it does is just clean it up. Digital files have like that film on top of them that you've got to scrape off to really get the beauty of the actual image. That's all I'm doing with the presets. And then I literally hit select all, boom, I hit one of the presets, I walk away, I come back and I export and I don't ever think about it again. In terms of the Fuji lenses, I use the f2s because they're smaller, less expensive, and they had fast autofocus and they're weather sealed. And there's not, with a small chip camera, there's not a whole hell of a lot of difference between a 1.4 and an f2. The 1.4s had that wonky autofocus and the 2s didn't. And they were weather sealed and they were cheap and I got a deal on them and they're small. And that's it. With a small chip camera, you're not going to get fall off like you will with a full chip. That's one of the downsides of the small chip cameras, is that you're just not going to get that full frame Sony Canon look with this system. I do think that the Fuji Speedmaster, it's not a Fuji lens, it's a Chinese made lens. That is 50.95 that I use. One of my X-T2s has a 9.5-50 on it all the time. That's about as close as you're gonna get to a full frame camera, but it still doesn't look full frame. The beauty is that you've got this dirt cheap camera that's tiny, that has amazing color fidelity in the file. And whatever, if it's stolen or broken or I lose it or it falls off my handlebars, then I'm not out a lot of money. And that's it. It's not to say that if Fuji said, here's a bunch of 1.4 lenses, that I wouldn't use them, but I probably wouldn't buy those because I don't need it. But again, let me remind you, I haven't done what I would call a serious reportage project since 2012. And I don't imagine having the time to do one anytime soon. The project that I'm working on now is almost 100% conceptual. There are 2 styles of photograph, 2 versions of 2 content layers in it. And those are very straightforward photographs, but the idea of the project itself is conceptual. So the camera I'm using and the look of the files isn't really that important anymore. It's just, and I've worked on it one day in the last year. So why I'm even mentioning it, maybe I'm losing it. Maybe I've done too many Q&As. Maybe I should have eaten something. I don't know. I don't know. There could be a million reasons, a million flaws. I am like any protagonist. I have a tragic flaw, at least 1 or 2 or 3. So thank you for everybody that sent questions in. I appreciate it. And I still have a whole bunch of questions that I haven't gotten to from people, so I really appreciate it. And remember, I'm just one person. My life is different from everybody else. My opinions, you may love them, you may hate them. It's fine. That's what a democracy is about. Let's enjoy it. Whatever you're doing with your camera, I wish you the best of luck, and I will see you soon.